When we come back, I want to talk about something very near and dear to me. And you hear me talk about Black Lives Matter all the time and just how dangerous they are as an organization. Well, Ben Mannes, I've had him on the show in the past. He wrote a great piece in The Hill about the disconnect, the intellectual disconnect between the law-abiding and the supporters of criminals. Going to be a really interesting segment. You're going to want to hear it. Stick around. You're with the John Cardillo Show, 880 The Biz.
This is the John Cardillo Show on 880 The Biz. Listen up. It's the John Cardillo Show.
Welcome back to the program. You know who that was. My favorite people at Black Lives Matter in New York City back in December 2014, right after we lost police officers Lou and Ramos to a black murderer, screaming, what do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now. It's a movement of people who support cop killers. That's why they have a tremendous disconnect with everyone else, with common sense, every law-abiding person. And then you got moronic celebrities like Colin Kaepernick and Beyonce, who get out there and support them as if they're some kind of wonderful civic organization. I'm not the only guy who thinks this way. Joining me now is another guy who thinks this way, Ben Mannes, law enforcement, a subject matter expert. I've had him on the show before. Really interesting piece in The Hill. Ben, how are you? Love the piece, and I think you nail it. Yeah, how you doing, man? I think you nail it in this piece.
And it's a pleasure to be on the air, and I appreciate your good words. So, look, there's a disconnect between the public at large, not just Black Lives Matter, and the law enforcement community, and it's perpetuated by local politicians. So you've heard the phrase, all politics are local. Everyone has before.
And it's true, and it's very true.
Right, and look, it's very hard to get into the mind of a police officer unless you've served. And we used to have, we in the law enforcement community, you included, used to have a culture of, we called them hairbags in New York. If you don't know what you're talking about, don't talk about it, right?
Right.
So what's necessary is, and this is what I wrote about, a role clarification so that people understand what a police officer is supposed to do and not supposed to do, what their job is in the street, and then what other services are failing that community so that people aren't directing all their ire at law enforcement. Now, why I say this, John, is very simple. You're in contact with a person as a police officer because something went wrong, whether that person is reporting a crime, being stopped on a traffic, issue, or actually getting locked up. So they're not good time Charlie. Yes, there's the PAL. Yes, there's community relations. There are good instances where you're going to, know your police and your community. But in the circumstances where people are complaining out there, and it's become the mantle of the Black Lives Matter movement, they're making out the police to be these murderous marauders who are going
but here's the problem. But Ben, here's the problem, and I say this every day on air. By and large, and it's anecdotal, but as I'm speaking with Ben Mannes. Ben is a law enforcement subject matter expert, and he writes often for The Hill on policing and police community relations. So, Ben, when I speak to the audience, they call into the show, they email me, and I just speak to people in general, whether I'm at an event or a political event. By and large, people respect the police. Yeah, they're annoyed when they, when they get pulled over, they get a speeding ticket. It's a nuisance, and they can say the cop was rude to them. But by and large, working, law-abiding, productive people of all races don't have a problem with the police, and because they pretty much don't interact with them. They don't have things going on in their lives that necessitate police involvement. And it's been my experience that the more the police are involved in your life, the less you like the police. But it's also been my experience that the more the police are involved in your life, you're doing something to bring the police into your life. The police aren't clairvoyant. They don't just go to a place to harass you. They're called for service to a location.
That's right.
So you combine that. You combine that with the institutional progressivism in newsrooms and their immediate default to find the most sensational story that damns to hell anything remotely considered conservative. And policing should be an apolitical institution, but it's not. It's now considered conservative because they carry guns and they do things that don't glorify criminality. So when you combine all that, it was inevitable that the media was going to pick up the mantle of cops are horrible, abusive, murderous criminals, and bad guys, gangbangers, and thugs are really modern-day Robin Hoods who, but for the police, would be living in a beautiful utopia, that the ghetto would be a bunch of people sitting on stoops, drinking 40s with the sun shining, like a Spike Lee movie, and these would be beautiful brownstones. That if the police pulled out, the ghetto would be a wonderful place. So I think we also have to address that fallacy, that democratic construct, that progressive construct, where they're creating this fantasy world that never has existed, never will exist, and never could exist. And they're demonizing cops to get there.
Absolutely. So here's the situation. It goes back many generations, and police shouldn't be politicized. So do you remember a commissioner in New York named Lee Brown?
Yeah, out of town Brown. He was a Houston guy, and then he got the job as New York PC and disappeared.
Exactly. Well, he went back to Houston, where he ended up becoming mayor after becoming the
yeah.
But Lee Brown introduced community policing, which in and of itself is a great idea because it was a parody of an original 1950s, 1960s form of urban policing where a cop physically walked a beat. When you politicized law enforcement and mayoral administrations take credit for law enforcement activities, even on the right side of the aisle, the Giuliani and Bratton got in their original problems in the 90s after the big decline. You have a situation where it's now perpetuating a political dishonesty. And the police have become the brunt of that because, well, at the end of the day, unless you're an elected sheriff, you report to one of these politicians. So it's almost an apolitical problem being perpetuted by unethical or corrupt politics.
Stop, Ben. I want to jump in there. That's a great point, and I'm going to digress, but it's something you'll find interesting.
Sure.
I worked for Bill Bratton in the 90s, and like many others in NYPD, we thought he was great. Well, I'll tell you, I'm wondering now if we weren't misplacing our respect, if it shouldn't have gone to Giuliani. Because I'll tell you, the Bill Bratton of 2014, 15, 16 is not the Bill Bratton of 1994, up to and including him now taking a job with Teneo Holdings, sitting down with Hillary and trying to sell her as a pro-police candidate. So I agree with you is what I'm saying. These appointed these chief law enforcement officers who are appointed, the chiefs, the commissioners, in Chicago they call it superintendent or supervisor. They are byproducts of the administration who appoints them. I've lost faith in them. Bratton really has caused me to lose faith in all but a few of them.
Well, you have to give Bratton the respect for finding Jack Naple as a lieutenant in a subway station and creating Comstat. But
he's done good things.
When your boss is a mayor, we really should be directing our issues to the politicization of police. And how you do this is because, look, at the end of the day, we have a serious corruption problem in local politics. All politics are local. I wrote a 3-part series in the Hill preceding the one that you're discussing now about how it's an epidemic crisis here in Philadelphia. Now, at the same time, last night we clocked 188 murders. That's 15 more than last year.
Hold on. So Philadelphia clocked 188 murders so far in 2016, 15 more than the year before, because Baltimore and Chicago are seeing the same trends.
Yeah, it's all skyrocketing.
Right.
And look, Miami, Florida has never had checks and balances. You've never had Republican and Democratic representation in local government. I am not a partisan guy. I believe the issues are nonpartisan, but if you don't have a check and balance, what happens is every time you mention corruption, the next anecdote out of someone's mouth is some cop who tuned somebody up. Which we have a district attorney who just appointed a known scofflaw, a guy who he has federal and local liens. He has multiple. We're talking over 8. And he was appointing this guy, by the way, a member of the Nation of Islam, to the chief of investigations for the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office.
But let me ask you a question. Right. Well, look at what's going on in Brooklyn with the Brooklyn DA. What's his name? Thompson. He was forcing his staff, who made a lot less money than him, to buy him lunch, wash his car, gas it up at their expense. It's a city-owned car. I mean, this is but they get away. But a Republican, it is partisan, because a white Republican district attorney never would have gotten away with that. He got away with it for years upon years upon years because he was a black Democrat. And I hate to bring that in, but media cover is given. Media cover is given. I've always said there is nothing breaks down our system like public corruption and perjury. And when it's a public official engaging in the corruption and perjuring themselves, the entire system falls down, Ben. Hold the thought. I'm so glad you went there, because it's exactly what I want to talk to you about in the next segment. We're going to take a quick commercial break. More with Ben Mannes when we come back. Stick around. You're going to want to hear this. I'm going to tell you about some mind-blowing corruption down here in Florida, something I've been talking about over in Hendry County. I want to get Ben's take on it. You're with the John Cardillo Show, 880 The Biz.
This is the John Cardillo Show.
Welcome back to the program. Still with me is Ben Mannes. Ben is a law enforcement subject matter expert and really one of the better ones. And also, Ben, you're good on air, which all too often I have people that write great pieces. They come on air and they can't convey it, so it's refreshing. But we were talking about...
No, I try.
Yeah, hey, no, it's a New York thing, man. I know I might offend people with that, but we can just, ramble on and be interesting. But here's the thing. I'm looking at a race here in Florida. I really wanted to talk to you, and I was really happy when you pinged me back when I asked you to be on, and you said you had a piece on corruption, because I'm dealing with a race down here. I'm covering it. It's a sheriff's race in Little Hendry County, and people that have lived in South Florida their whole lives don't even know where Hendry County is. I didn't until about a year ago, and it's just west of Palm Beach County, just east of the Fort Myers area. It sort of sits in the middle of the state. It's really old Florida: agriculture, farms, ranches, U.S. sugar, a couple of little towns, and a pretty part of Florida. But the corruption, it is now. I was a cop during the Mullen Commission. Man, I can't talk today. I was a cop during the Mullen Commission. Came into the academy when all that was going on, and I've had Mike Dowd, from the documentary The 7-5 on the show,
I know Mike.
And we talk about it. Yeah, and he's an interesting interview, Mike. But even Mike, I showed him this case, and because now he works with internal affairs groups, helping them weed out bad cops, kind of like Frank Abagnale from Catch Me If You Can. Even he said, he goes, man, we were bad. Yeah, he said, we were bad, but at least we did it in the shadows. He's like, these people in Hendry County, they're doing it out in the open. And I don't know if you've heard anything I've put out about this, but we've got a sheriff who covered the hit and run of a little girl. She lived, thankfully, for a guy who's now a federal inmate. He showed up at the jail. A guy punched a deputy in the face. When they transported the guy to the county jail, the sheriff was waiting there and voided the arrest. And I'm getting story upon story upon story like this. And when confronted, the sheriff and his enablers, now the deputies can't stand him. They feel completely abandoned by their bosses. But the sheriff, the local politicians, the party bosses, his enablers are like, they actually said this to me, Ben, on Facebook. It's been this way in this county forever. This is how we like it. This is how it's going to stay. People have tried to invest. This was written on Facebook publicly. People have tried to investigate us for 40 years. It hasn't worked. What makes you think you're different? I mean, the corruption is that out in the open. It's really mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could spend the next 5 segments doing tremendous corruption stories. Now, you're using Hendry County, right? I could give you New Orleans. I could give you Chicago. I could give you Philadelphia stories that will absolutely turn the rest of your hair white.
You worked with Maples, right?
Markets.
You worked with Jack Maples, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was, I worked with him. He was a deputy commissioner. I was a PO, so I was not exactly, working with him.
No. He was there when I was there, but I thought you did some work with, you know what, I think it was someone else I had on. It may have been Nick Selby, who did work with Jack Maples, but we were talking about the corruption in New Orleans when Maples went down there to take over that department. It was mind-blowing.
And it's still an issue, although the NYPD, see, this is a great example of when a police agency, granted with their problems, gets the brunt of the entire corruption argument. And I'm glad you brought up New Orleans, because the situation here is if you want to fix anywhere, Hendry County, on a small scale, but I attend the conferences of the Association of Inspectors General, and these are people who only investigate waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'm coming at it from the perspective of, all right, I live in Philadelphia. I'm active in Philadelphia. We can't politicize the issue. And a good example of why we can't do that and make it partisan is because, well, first things first, I'm in a city of 7-1 Democratic voters. But I'm also in a community, which is the neighborhood's called Port Richmond. It's a lot like the Boston neighborhood portrayed in Mystic River. So it's an old Irish-Polish longshoreman community, right? These folks have been voting Democrat since Kennedy.
Yeah.
But their moral values and their work ethic is that of a Republican or any good person who wants to put back into that community.
But aren't we seeing that's a great point. Aren't we seeing a change this year? I'll tell you, my cousins in New York who are in the Carpenters Union and the guys I know who are iron workers and longshoremen, they've all got Trump stickers on their hard hats now. They've abandoned. They said, we don't care what the union is doing. And I don't know, it's a story that didn't make the mainstream media. I don't know if you saw it. The heads, the presidents of the 5 building trades unions under the AFL-CIO sent letters to Trumpka, that communist who runs AFL-CIO, and said, hey, look, you might be endorsing Hillary. We're endorsing Trump. Hillary doesn't stand for anything we stand for in terms of patriotism, work ethic, values. And so I think that we're seeing a sea change in how these people are going to vote this cycle.
Unfortunately, that's not the reality we're experiencing here. As you know, we had a major corruption indictment of the iron workers union. They arrested and convicted the business manager. And the business manager of Local 98, which is the electricians union, which is the most powerful political group in the Delaware Valley. At South Jersey, Philly, Delaware, right? And this guy had to be raided by the FBI not only 2 weeks ago, but his former political director, who is a sitting city councilman in Philadelphia, was also raided. So, you know, we could go all day about who's better, Republican or Democrat.
But you think the people are going to vote?
Mechanics of the issue.
But you still think that the hard hat? You think the hard hat guys are still going to vote Dem?
I think maybe
locally.
I know for a fact through reading indictments in the ironworkers. I know for a fact from talking to electricians here in Philadelphia that they're told not only who to vote for, but they're told to go out. If you're not working that day and you go down to Union Hall, they have street money and they will send you out to polling places. They mobilize you. So if you vote the other way,
I guess
the other way, you could lose your job.
You're out of the union, right? They'll pull your card and you're out of the union. I mean, but see, I blame the Republican Party for this. I really do. I know you're an apolitical guy. I'm not, because they don't get in the trenches and fight this. They don't shine a light on it. They don't call it out. Look, we know the unions are democratic institutions, but the union membership, they can campaign, they can do whatever they want reluctantly, but nobody knows who they're pulling the lever for, who they're filling out the form for when they get in that voting booth or on that voting little stanchion they give you now, these flimsy things. But, you know, I mean, these people, I fail to believe that the union guy breaking his back 15 hours a day to make overtime to live a little better believes in the policies of the Democratic Party. I do think they're conflicted at this point.
If they're paying attention to the amount of work, and that's the thing. I mean, we're building some buildings here, but if you go to, I mean, even Seattle, Washington is an extremely liberal city, but it sits in a tax-free state with very pro-business policies. You can't find any corner of that skyline that doesn't have a claim on it right now. So you're here in Philly where we raise taxes. We literally are the highest per capita tax in the country, and nobody's building anything. I mean, we do have one big project downtown. It's Comcast, who gets a huge tax break. So you have to consider where the money's going. Seattle's growing. Yeah. Austin, Texas is growing. Charlotte's growing, right? Where is the money going? It's places where they have pro-business policies. The failure is in the Republicans' approach to local politics. We could sit here and talk about Trump versus Clinton until we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, running for mayor, running for Congress, running for council, these are how actual change takes place in a municipality. Hey,
listen, Ben, I say it on air every day. I'm speaking with Ben Mannes, law enforcement subject matter expert. You know, Ben, I say it on air every day. President, we can debate it all day long. In this case, it'll be a little bit different because Hillary could severely tip the Supreme Court left for decades. But by and large, the president doesn't affect your everyday life. You're 100% right. Your city council does, your city commission, your mayor, your state representatives do, right? They set the state laws that affect your right to own a gun, et cetera. And people are they don't focus on those races. They'll turn out to vote in a presidential election. They should, right? But you've got people that'll vote in a presidential election, maybe in midterms for Senate and Congress, but they would never step out in an odd year to vote for their state rep or their city commissioner or their county commissioner.
Right.
They'll vote for them down ballot if they've got the right letter next to their name. And these are the people, you're right, who affect their everyday life very immediately.
So let's run with that for a second. That's the crux of the issue, even going back to the argument with BLM versus the role clarification for police. Community groups mobilize for specific parties, and they create a machine. Machine politics, ask Henry County, is the crux of any corrupt machine, right? When you have the Dailies in Chicago or Bob Brady running the machine here in Philadelphia, and you probably have an equivalent, in Miami, where you have a situation where one party runs the whole scene, Republican or Democrat, and nobody else could get in and fix anything. And that is real corruption. That isn't one cop tuning up one guy on the street. Yes, that happens, but cops have oversight. They have internal affairs. They have inspectors general. What happens when the entire top-down political machine of a jurisdiction, your county in particular there, Henry, is corrupt? Now, I sat in a presentation in the Inspector General Conference with the U.S. attorney who made the Ray Nagin case, the Inspector General for the state of Louisiana, and the emergency manager they brought into Detroit to fix that city. And it took massive external incidents to fix these. In Detroit, it was a bankruptcy. In New Orleans, it was Katrina. So all that federal money flowed into town, and there was inspector generals watching that. So what do you have to do to fix the system without having a hurricane wipe out your town to bring all the eyes on that?
Well, you're not. But here's the thing: nobody cares. Nobody cares. Look at Baltimore, right? Baltimore's murder rate in Baltimore is off the chart. Baltimore has as many murders as New York City, and they've got 1/10 the population. I think they both had around 200 last year. Baltimore 222 for this year alone, and it's going to be
a pretty small town.
It's a small town with 620,000 people. And so when you've got those kinds of rates, now Baltimore got no attention except for the Freddie Gray case, which was egregious, and what they did to those cops. I think Marilyn Mosby should be indicted for the way she abused her office. She should certainly be disbarred. But despite all that attention Baltimore got,
we know that.
Oh, she's getting sued. She should be disbarred. She should go the way of Nifong with the Duke lacrosse player. She should be in jail. But that's a whole other story. Yeah. But my point is, nothing will change in Baltimore. The people in Baltimore will still vote for the same types of politicians who come up in the same machine. Baltimore will still have potholes the size of craters in the street. I don't know if you've been. I mean, you're in Philly. You're not far. I don't know if you've been to West Baltimore lately. I drove through not long ago. Yeah, it looks like an episode of The Walking Dead. There are hundreds of just severely, just severely broken down drug addicts like zombies roaming the streets at night. It is the most bizarre scene I've ever witnessed in a major American city, a city that was formerly a prosperous port city. Now that's because
I have that sitting 1 mile west of where I live right now in Philadelphia. They call it Kensington. 1 mile west of where I'm sitting. That exact situation you described is what's happening. And until people start focusing on what's missing, stop focusing on the police. Look at the situations that Black Lives Matter is actually out there complaining about and wonder, okay, why are people in contact with the police in the first place? Here's a hint. It isn't because they're marauding looking for black youth to stop. They're there because they're being called. They're there because good folks, you've been to community meetings in the South Bronx, and they had the community policing meetings. They're begging for us to come in there. So this isn't a situation where the police are the enemy. The police are there doing the last line of defense. So what happened to education? Who's enforcing parenting? Who's doing civil law enforcement, like custody support warrants, right? Nobody is doing that, and it's leading kids to the pathway where they're going to get jacked up and placed on the hood of a radio car.
That's the problem, right?
Situation.
And I spoke about that yesterday, and it was Clinton's 94 crime bill led to a lot of this, and they're getting a pass. Ben, unfortunately, we're out of time. I got to go to a commercial break, but listen, I want to continue this. Let's set something up for next week. Come back with me Tuesday, Wednesday next week because it's too important.
Plug out there real quick.
Yeah, please go for it.
Twitter. Yeah, go for the Twitter. It's the easiest way whenever we post a story. TheHill.com is great, but, there's a million stories every corner of politics. At Public Safety SME. Follow me on Twitter. Whenever I pen something new, I put it up there. And we're all in this together, folks. Republican, Democrat, black, white, brown, or Asian. Come with us and let's fix these communities.
And you're a good read. I recommend everybody read Ben's pieces, especially at the Hill. Ben, as always, my friend, pleasure. I'll set something up with you for next week. Thanks for being here. When we come back, we're going to be talking about, you got it, we're going to be talking about a couple of pieces Daniel Horowitz